Too Much Information is a production of iHeart Radio. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Too Much Information, the show that brings you the little-known facts and secret histories behind your favorite movies, music, TV shows, and more. We are your VJs of very granular details. My name's Jordan Runtagh.
And I'm Alex Heigl. Am I the Jesse Camp?
Probably. I guess that would probably make me Kurt Loder as being old as hell. He's like pushing 80 now.
Yeah, and cantankerous.
No. Yeah, there you go. So I'll take that.
Okay. As you were.
Yeah. Well, in case you haven't figured it out, we are talking about a television staple that sent kids running home from school to stand their favorite artists. Using an innovative system of telecommunications. Who am I kidding? I basically grew up in the 1950s, so I will always think of this as the millennial American Bandstand. We are talking about Total Request Live. Yes, the show where genial frat bro Carson Daly unveiled the 10 most requested videos of the day and hung out with his famous friends at the epicenter of American entertainment, Times Square. I'd like to say that I eagerly tuned into this show every single day, but then I would be a liar. That being said, I did watch it every now and then with a friend, and I look back on it fondly. How about you, Heigl? Were you a loyal viewer, or had you already been corrupted by punk and or jazz?
No, I think my period of being into like mainstream music, it dovetailed with the new metal era of TRL. Like I'm pretty sure I remember seeing like Fred Durst on it and like
blowing up a boat.
Well, yeah, the spring break stuff for sure. But yeah, by the time the like New York rock revolution, like whatever that they called that.
Oh, with the Strokes and
yeah, like that era. I had a really cool older cousin who gave me the Strokes CD, and by the time like MTV2 started and I started just seeing like older stuff, I was like, I have no interest in TRL. Not that I ever really I never called it or anything. I remember like watching music videos, seeing like the Busta Rhymes, Janet Jackson one. Remember that with the T1000 technology, the liquid metal.
Oh,
no?
A little bit. Yeah. I mean, see, I mostly just remember the Bum Bum song is honestly my main TRL memory.
Good.
Yeah. I mean, it fits.
That's appropriate.
Yeah, exactly. What, it would have been like 11, 12 around then?
Yeah.
Something like that. It's perfect. I mean, TRL is really interesting to me because it's a show that I think could have only been as big as it was during a very specific era, arguably the 10 years that it was on TV from 1998 to 2008. And in a sense, it was the original social media. You know, it was an interactive television show that served as a meeting place for teens to compare notes on what other teens were talking about. And it was also the last dying gasp of the monoculture before it vanished entirely, but not before it gave us iconic artists like Britney Spears, Eminem, the Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, and Beyonce, plus unforgettable music videos and some priceless TV moments involving a diva and an ice cream cart. In an article for The Ringer, Rob Harvilla describes TRL as, quote, having an end of empire feel, a dizzying peak for music television, the music biz, and pop music as a whole. Just before file sharing, MP3s, and streaming completely shifted the tectonic plates of entertainment forever. And this was especially interesting for me because I started working at MTV in their Times Square headquarters just a year after TRL was canceled. So I remember not only passing the shell of this old studio on a daily basis, but also having to grapple with the same trend shifts that drove the show off the airwaves in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's broadly accurate. I think once Osbournes came on and they realized that you could do, reality TV for cheaper and bigger ratings, that was the end. I don't know how file sharing and ever, like, I tend to think of MTV as being unmoored from most of the actual music industry.
No, that's fair.
But oh man, you should plot the ratings for this with the VMAs. Because didn't the VMAs hit like an all-time low recently?
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
Oy, American monoculture, man. What a dizzying high.
Well, a rich text, as my friend Alex Heigl often says. So we'll talk about all that a little later. From the crazy lengths that fans went to get from the sidewalk into the studio, to Carson Daly's inexplicable friendship with Kid Rock, the time he got verbally abused by Prince, to the time he almost got attacked by a Backstreet Boys fan, and who ultimately won the epic battle of the boy bands, here is everything you didn't know about TRL. In 1998, MTV was at a crossroads. Music videos, which had been the lifeblood of the network since it launched in 1981, were not engaging young audiences anymore. Previously, the network chiefs had gotten around this problem by doing genre-specific music video blocks during the day. Your Headbangers Ball for metal fans, that kind of stuff. And the music scene traditionally reset itself with the prevalence of a new genre every few years. Grunge, gangster rap, stuff like that, which MTV would then capitalize on with these programming blocks, thus bringing in a fresh influx of fans to MTV and making the network relevant again. But by the late 90s, say 1997 and 1998, Kurt Cobain was dead, Michael Jackson was marred by child sexual abuse allegations, and the music scene lacked a signature star. MTV began its shift towards reality TV way back in 1992 with the launch of The Real World, and by 1997, the biggest star on the network was former Playboy centerfold Jenny McCarthy, the host of Singled Out, and she left at the end of that year. So the network set about trying to revitalize music videos, which they attempted to do with two separate shows, both with names that are pretty on the nose and pretty forgettable. A countdown request show called Total Request, and a live show featuring artist interviews and performances called MTV Live. TRL was basically a hybrid of these two shows, Total Request and MTV Live. Hence, Total Request Live.
Executive brain.
Yeah, exactly. So let's go over these two shows quickly. Total Request was basically a reboot of the show Dial MTV, which ran from 1986 to 1996. And this show was really the proto-TRL. Viewers requested their favorite videos by calling 1-800-DIAL-MTV, which, as you may recall, was the same line that TRL viewers called. And the host would count down the most requested videos of the day. And many early MTV brass had a background in radio, or top 40 countdowns were a big thing. So that, was an easy way to fill up programming in early MTV. Though they'd canceled Dial MTV by 1996, they decided to launch a similar show in April 1998 called Total Request, which is broadcast from MTV's headquarters at 1515 Broadway in Times Square, and also in the summer months from a beach house at Seaside Heights, New Jersey, which predicts another MTV juggernaut. But unlike the comparatively lively TRL, these shows were taped, not live, taped in an empty, dimly lit set. To help count down the 10 most requested music videos was a 23-year-old former DJ for LA's mammoth K-Rock radio station named Carson Daly. I genuinely tried to find interesting things about his early life, but there's nothing interesting about Carson Daly, which is keeping on brand for him, I suppose.
He is truly the void.
Yeah.
A gaping. Maybe that's why he was so successful at it. And then it failed when they got people with real personalities on there.
It basically made any artist on the show seem vivacious and interesting next to him. Yeah.
What was he doing? Was he on air at K-Rock?
Yeah. You got to start as a DJ. We'll talk more a little later on about his early life. But yeah, he was an on-air personality.
Grim.
And Carson also had a hand in the other show the network launched around this time, MTV Live, which also included a whole rotating cast of VJs, including Toby Amies, I think that's how you say it, and Ananda Lewis. And MTV Live started its run in September 1997, a full year before TRL, and it included performances and interviews, but it didn't include a studio audience, which made it seem kind of soulless. Now, MTV Live was filmed at a brand new studio at MTV's headquarters at 1515 Broadway, overlooking Times Square below, and it had previously been occupied by a bank, but when the lease expired, MTV took possession and built what would become their flagship studio, not unlike ABC's Good Morning America studios across the street in Times Square. Unlike GMA, this new studio had some issues. It was adjacent to the Minskoff Theater, and there were sound problems when the Minskoff Theater did matinee performances of The Lion King on Wednesdays. And a slightly more serious problem, the glass in the windows that surrounded the studio were not bulletproof. And as TRL co-creator Bob Kuzbit later said in Billboard's oral history on the show in 2017, bulletproof glass costs so much more. Anytime all these people went and stood by the window, you would sort of hold your breath.
That's grim.
Yeah. MTV executive Judy McGrath was equally blunt about the bootleg quality of the studio. The ceiling was too low, the glass wasn't bulletproof, and the space was noisy, but we just blew through all of that in the interest of that great window, she told Vulture for their oral history in 2017. Now, neither of these summertime experimental shows, MTV Live or Total Request, really set the world on fire. But Total Request was successful enough at engaging viewers that producers Bob Cusbit and Tony DeSanto had the bright idea to retool the show by expanding it into an hour and combining it with the anything can happen anarchic element of MTV Live. Hence, Total Request Live, its name a combo of the two forerunners. And it was added to the network's lineup in the fall of 1998. And it's just funny, TRL was such a mutt that the show's creators don't even appear on TRL's Wikipedia page, which is pretty funny.
Ouch.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, because it really just was like ideas by committee, and then those ideas got morphed into other ideas that then got combined with the previous ideas. And yeah, it was not like somebody was sitting around and had a giant light bulb idea. It was just like, let's combine these two things. They initially scheduled TRL, which was then known by its full title, Total Request Live. I think it became TRL a few years later. It was scheduled at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, prime time for kids returning home from school. I'm curious, if it was live, is it like SNL rules where it's live on the East Coast and Central Time and then it's rebroadcast in LA? You know, because LA is 3 hours behind. If it was broadcast at like 12:30 in LA, all the kids would have been at school. I was unable to find anything about that online, but questions for our time.
But how did the howling void at the center of TRL, the blank, endless nothingness of Carson Daly, let's shine a brighter light on him. Funnily enough, they despite being a known quantity to the studio, as much as anyone can truly know Carson Daly, they were not interested in having him there. Bob Cusbit told Billboard, "When I said Carson should host TRL, there was silence in the room." Foreshadowing the rest of his career. He was too.
He's got a net worth of like $40 million.
I know.
So
That's why I can say this is because I'm totally punching up. Like that dude he's like NBC. He's like an NBC anchor. God, truly just.
Yeah, he's on Today's Show and he's a co-producer of The Voice.
Just talk about the. God grant me the mediocre white men tweet. Like, just truly failing upwards. Cusbit continued, he was too white bread for a lot of the brass. There had been talk of, like, let's get Chris Rock to host it, which would have been incredible.
Yeah.
Paul Scheer, comedian, creator of the TRL spoof Scheer RL, later observed, Carson needed to be a blank canvas because the colors of those celebrities were so vibrant. But the self-seriousness, in retrospect, is laughable. That sit-down with Marilyn Manson was treated like Barbara Walters talking to Gaddafi. So, you mentioned, or one of us mentioned earlier, that Carson Daly was a K-Rock DJ. Jordan, is it a stretch to call K-Rock one of the most influential radio stations, period?
Yeah, I would say so, certainly.
Yeah.
At least of a certain era. I don't know about now, but
right.
I mean, it's certainly in the, I would say, 70s through 90s. They were breaking tons of huge bands.
But before all that, Carson Daly was gripped by golf fever.
Wait, hang on. I'm getting something in my earpiece. We're actually getting something. We have something interesting about Carson Daly. Okay, wait, stand by.
It would be amazing if it was like a young Carson taught himself to play piano. And it's like, no, he wanted to be a golfer. Yeah, he wanted to become a professional golfer. He attended Loyola Marymount University on a golf scholarship and got his start in the broadcasting world by interning for none other than Jimmy Kimmel, who would have been doing Man Show around this time.
No, he was a DJ. He was a radio DJ.
Okay. Yeah, so he was a friend of the the Dailies. The West Coast Dailies. The California Dailies. Carson later said on Late Night with Seth Meyers, I was his intern, and I ended up falling in love with radio, and I sort of owe everything I have to him. Daly later admitted that he suffered from generalized anxiety disorder, and said that moments before the cameras were set to roll on TRL, he would have a hard time breathing and become terrified for no apparent reason, which, yeah, I mean, how many people were watching this show at its peak? That seems like a very reasonable reaction.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially if when you had like, I guess there was probably nobody who was like actually dangerous on this show. Kid Rock, DMX.
I don't know, Nelly.
What did Nelly do?
I guess he just had a bandage on his eye, which probably means that he's less dangerous because he actually got hit.
Oh, that wasn't a real bandage. That was like a total fake thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was just like a style thing. He said I think he started it because he had like a zit there one day.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh.
You thought it was like a scar he was hiding for
I
decade of his career?
I thought he got attacked. I don't know.
Oh, it says, well, I guess according to Quora, to cover up a basketball injury.
Oh.
Yes, as Daly's replacement, Damian Fahey?
Damian Fahey, sorry, it's a typo.
As his replacement, Damian Fahey later said, when you're on TRL, you're in the middle of Times Square surrounded by 4 cameras, 60 screaming teenagers, and Shakira's next to you, or Madonna's next to you. So it's like, interview her, pay attention to the kids, listen if the director is talking to you in your ear, take cues from the camera guy, read cue cards. It was way more complicated than I was used to. But, you know, Carson's nerves could have also resulted from the fact that he became an immediate punching bag. Much like we've done. Just something about him wants to bully him.
You know what? He looks like a husky dog come to life with those blue eyes and like the stubble. Yeah.
What did he?
Not that I want to punch a husky. I just
No.
want to clarify that, but.
Did people put posters of him up? Did people find him cute? I guess, yeah, because he was married. He was engaged to Tara Reid. He was like...
And your beloved Jennifer Love Hewitt. He wasn't engaged to her, but they were together.
Man. Good Lord. just grinding this podcast to a halt.
Was it like secondhand stardom? Was it just like basking in the reflected glow?
He must be really nice. No, I don't think anyone who's friends with Kid Rock is like, oh. Was he ever canceled? Whatever happened to Carson Daly? Like personally?
No, I don't think so.
Carson Daly arrest?
He's never. No,
bummer.
He's clean.
he's clean. Just hoping to find some. I just hate that guy.
He really, he brings out.
I know
such antipathy.
I don't remember this. I don't remember this SNL thing, but Jimmy Fallon's impression of him was I'm Carson Daly and I'm a big tool.
Which is rich coming from Jimmy Fallon, but
yeah. Another man living in a glass house who took shots at Carson on the regular was fellow DJ and, as you call him, humanoid Big Bird, Jesse Camp. Who would come up to Carson just before they would go to the live and say stuff like, hey man, I just saw your mom at Au Bon Pain making out with John Voight. Which is...
That's good.
That is good. John Voight.
I hate Jimmy Fallon more than I hate Carson Daly.
Yeah.
Because he stole my date. Yeah. I told you this.
I didn't know about this, no.
Really?
I don't think we've talked about this.
Oh my God. Yeah, it was like fall of 2007, and I was at NYU studying in the dramatic writing department, and for students they gave you discount tickets to Broadway plays, and I asked this person I like to go with me, and during the intermission she didn't come back, and I was almost worried, and I went into the lobby to look for her, and I see she's talking to somebody and the guy's back is to me, and I walk over, and right as I get there he turns around and it's Jimmy Fallon. And he just offers his greasy hand to me, and then the show after the show, she went off with him.
Oh, was this SNL era or late night era?
This is 2007, so this would have been pre Tonight Show, but post SNL.
Oh man, I'm sorry, bud.
Thank you. Yeah.
Anyway, Jesse Camp later defended his actions by saying, I unfairly lumped Carson in with the things about late 90s pop culture that I didn't like. But, you know, as you alluded to earlier, TRL was great for Carson, at least his love life. He met Jennifer Love Hewitt on the show, and the two of them started dating, and they were so dogged by paparazzi, because this would have been the height of her fame. This is, and I Know What You Did Last Summer era. Whenever they went out to bars, that she bought him a golden tee arcade golf game for his apartment in the hopes that they would have quiet moments together playing golden tee. God, he is just the most boring man on the planet. Ah,
and then he blew it.
Of course he did. Of course he did. Couldn't hold on to that. My God. That's why I hate him. When they broke up then, he brought that machine, and now a garish beeping monument to his heartbreak, into the MTV offices, where it became a popular hangout spot for the rest of the staff working on the show. I love that. He would also get engaged to Tara Reid in 2000, then fresh off the meteoric success of American Pie. But that didn't last either. And God, he's gross. This is gross. More often than not, he could be found at the Manhattan Gentlemen's Club Scores. She later described to Elle magazine, of all publications, as an extension of my living room. He said, "We knew the bartenders, the girls, the owners. It was where celebrities went to be alone." He claimed that he treated the Backstreet Boys to their first trip to a strip club, which I don't know if I buy that. Weren't they from Florida?
Yeah.
Carson's TRL successor, Damien Fahey, said that Daly's advice to him was get in the paper. He tells a story about Fahey tells a story about getting popped while he was papped.
Yeah.
Just makes me say like I'm ordering soda in the Midwest. Getting papped. While out with Lindsay Lohan, and the next day he was in the makeup room at MTV when Carson burst in holding a copy of the New York Post's page 6 section with his picture in it saying something like, "That's my boy." And it should come as no surprise to people acquainted with the tenor of disgust in my voice that one of Carson's dearest friends in the world is Kid Rock. And the two of them could be seen at the New York City Public Library browsing the rare books section. No, of course not. They were in the Scores together because they're sentient Jersey Shore airbrushed t-shirts. Lars Ulrich of Metallica, himself no stranger to Scores. To Scores or to being universally disliked, once approached Kid Rock and asked him what many would feel is a logical question: why do you like Carson Daly? And Kid Rock's response was, cool people stand and judge other people. But at the end of the day, the people who are themselves and comfortable with themselves are really the cool people. Wise words from Mr. Rock. It is perhaps fitting that on the final episode of the original TRL's run in 2008, Carson passed the mic to Kid Rock for the last word, and Kid Rock responded by belching and saying, "I'm really drunk."
If that's not a fitting epitaph, then damn it, I don't know what is. But we are getting ahead of ourselves because this is just the beginning. We can't talk about the finale before we talk about the premiere. TRL debuted on September 14th, 1998, 25 years ago this year, from MTV's headquarters in Times Square. Much like MTV Live, the first year of episodes featured no live audience, and the streets outside were not crammed with fans holding up signs. MTV executive Judy McGrath later said, "When we started TRL, it was just Carson, the camera guys, and a floor director. There wasn't a studio audience, and we never thought about people showing up to Times Square." Do you want to play a little here? Did you look ahead? Let's play a little game here. You want to guess the
I did. I did.
Okay.
But no one, I will tell you, no one with a million guesses could guess which of these things doesn't belong.
Yes. Okay, we're going to do a little rundown of the first ever TRL countdown from the premiere episode, September 14th, 1998.
Start with the most popular one. Start with the most popular one.
Okay, we'll start at number 1 and work our way down. And I have to say, the mix is a pretty good indication of the three main genres that would help elevate TRL into cultural touchstone status. You got R&B, nu metal, and boy bands. Number 1, Backstreet Boys, I'll Never Break Your Heart. Okay, it's good. Number 2, NSYNC, Tearing Up My Heart. So right off the bat, you're establishing the precedent of the two preeminent boy bands duking it out for the first place. I like that. Number 3, Aaliyah featuring Timbaland, Are You That Somebody?
From the Dr. Dolittle soundtrack?
I think so. I believe so. Number 4, Aerosmith, Don't Want to Miss a Thing, our favorite slow dance in my high school dance.
From the Armageddon
soundtrack, absolutely. Number 5, Will Smith, Just the Two of Us. Number 6, Marilyn Manson, The Dope Show. Number 7, Usher, My Way. Goo Goo Dolls, Iris.
From the City of Angels soundtrack.
City of Angels. I accidentally plagiarized it for a love letter I wrote to a girl once. Monica, number 9, with The First Night. Number 10, give you 1,000 guesses.
No one could get this.
No.
Not a single soul.
Monster Magnet, Space Lord.
I remember that song. That song goes, Space Lord, mother. Yeah, it's like Hesher. It's like Hesh Southern rock trending into new metal. But no, man, I would have guessed Limp Bizkit.
Yeah.
Although Limp Bizkit would have been in the middle ground between Faith and Nookie is my bet.
Nookie was
but
summer
I could have
99.
guessed Korn. But Monster Magnet, good Lord.
Yeah.
They'll always have that.
No one can take that from them. Well, it's important to reiterate that TRL launched at a time when music videos and consequently MTV were at a low point. TRL creator Bob Cusack says ratings were low and the energy was low. And TRL was crucial in revitalizing not just MTV, but the music video as an art form. TRL's viewership peaked in 1999 with almost 800,000 tuning in every day, which to me seems low, but I guess that's kind of par for the course for a basic cable network. And Bob Cusack said that he knew the show was catching on when staffers at MTV took an active interest in the NSYNC versus Backstreet Boys debate, and morale had visibly improved, and he knew they were on to something big. Another sign that the show was a hit was the ever-growing crowd of fans outside of 1515 Broadway in Times Square. About 2 weeks after TRL's premiere, a young girl camped outside the studio with a sign reading, "Hey Carson, let me up." Sadly, the name of this patient zero TRL fan has been lost to time. I would have loved to have interviewed her. The following week, about 30 fans had gathered. And around this time, the producers who'd been, taking notice of this started toying with the idea of making a live audience a permanent part of the show. And the producers pitched this idea to the network brass at an off-site meeting on Long Island, where they secretly shipped a bunch of kids. I probably should have phrased that better. Sent a bunch of kids to the Long Island resort where this meeting was taking place, and they had the kids line up with signs outside these big windows outside the conference room with the shades pulled down. And then at a crucial point during the presentation, the producers dramatically lifted the shades, and all the MTV executives saw all these kids outside with signs, and they were screaming. Good kind of screaming, not the shipping
I was going to say,
screaming.
they're lucky none of those guys had a gun on them.
Yeah. And then they opened the door to the conference room and all these kids came swarming in, and that was their way of kind of dramatically illustrating the point that, a live audience could really add something to this show. Casting director Courtney Mullen was the one responsible for deciding who would and who wouldn't make it in off the street. And this was tough on days when artists like, the Backstreet Boys or NSYNC were on the show. On these days, Courtney Mullen would arrive at the office in the morning to find kids and their parents sleeping on the street in the middle of Times Square, desperate to stake out a spot for the chance at being allowed into the studio with their heroes. And Courtney said, they either loved me or hated me, these kids. And considering there were upwards of a few thousand people waiting and the studio had room for about 60 audience members, she dealt with mostly hatred. She devised trivia contests and other games to try to ensure that the biggest fans made it inside, but this was not always possible, and obviously lots of people left the premises disappointed and sometimes enraged. Courtney told The Ringer in 2017, I had the parents who'd be screaming at me, yelling at me. Don't you understand? I had to call off work today. I got here at 1 o'clock in the morning. And then there were bribes, so many bribes. No matter where the parent worked or what they did, they were like, I could get you this. I could send you this. They were desperate to make sure their kid was happy. And obviously I didn't take anything, but it was just so funny, the things I was offered. She said that the strangest bribe she ever received was a year's supply of peanut chews.
Someone has your number.
The most obscure candy known to humankind. Some enterprising fans figured out where Carson Daly's office was in the building and rented hotel rooms at the Marriott Marquis directly across the street, where they would stand naked in the window with signs reading, "We want into TRL. We know you're there, Carson." I do wonder how effective that was. My guess is very. The crowd size outside the TRL studios made Times Square even more of a chaotic hellhole than it already was. It was essentially a mini New Year's Eve every single weekday. The screams could get so loud that they were audible in the MTV offices on the 25th floor of the building, hours before the show taping was even set to begin. Late-era TRL VJ Dave Holmes would compare the sounds to, quote, being in the world's largest exotic bird shop. There's a weird primal nature to it, where they all hit the same loud note at once. It was almost like a mating call. And the crowd would get so huge and unruly at times that the NYPD would ask TRL producers to lower the shades on the studio windows in a desperate attempt at dispersing fans. And TRL's executive producer Tim Heigl later told The Ringer, the fans would wait hours and then we would drop the shades and you would hear them it was like air being let out of a balloon, this moan outside. I always felt bad for Carson. People were pissed, and I think a lot of guests took pride when the shade came down. They knew they had kind of ground Midtown to a halt. And it quickly got to a point where doing events outside the studio in the middle of Times Square became impossible. At one point early in the show's history, the producers toyed with the idea of sneaking Jay-Z into the Virgin Megastore across the street to surprise customers, but the managers of the Virgin Megastore quickly put a stop to it because they couldn't guarantee Jay-Z's safety. TRL producer Brian Terry told The Ringer, we had to get back into his SUV to drive the literally 9 tire rotations it would take to get from the Virgin Megastore to the TRL studios, and it was like the Pope. People were crawling on the cars, and I'm just like, holy Jesus, this is something else. And many of the producers on the show have nice memories of Eminem's 2002 appearance tied to the premiere of 8 Mile. TRL staffers begged the NYPD to allow them to keep the shades up so that Eminem could wave to the crowd, who would sprint through traffic in the middle of Times Square to try to get closer to him. And casting director Courtney Mullen later said, I remember how emotional he was. Literally, you could see tears in his eyes. It really hit him. I think it was chilling to see Times Square like that, and just to see he wasn't taking it for granted. He really, really appreciated that moment.
That's cute.
I know.
I'm glad we got that moment for Eminem.
A happy Eminem is my favorite Eminem.
This is really what my memory of TRL is: screaming NSYNC and Backstreet Boys fans. And yeah, do you remember like the girls in your school like drawing battle lines about this stuff?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, this is one of the few things that I actually like have firsthand memories of in this era.
Yeah, Millennium. I remember the argument about who was going to sell more. Like these like
it's like Oasis versus Blur, but
yeah, but I mean like,
but people cared.
No, I was going to say like 11-year-old girls like going and looking up like Billboard sales figures at the newsstand.
I don't remember that. I mostly remember like I don't really care who sells more. Like they're my favorite. Like end of story.
Yeah. So the preamble to all that was the 2-hour Backstreet Boys special, TRL special, tied to the release of Millennium on May 18th, 1999, drew so many fans that Times Square, the busiest place on the Eastern Seaboard, was shut down. This is, a pretty easy place to pinpoint the moment at which the boy band phenomenon reached critical mass. Millennium, obviously, entered the Billboard 200 at number 1, sold 1.1 million copies in its first week, breaking the previous SoundScan record held by Garth Brooks. And then this would happen again a year later with the release of NSYNC's sophomore album, No Strings Attached, which shattered Millennium's first week sales by selling 2.4 million copies, notching a record that lasted 15 years to be broken in 2015 with Adele and the record 25.
Were you a Backstreet boy or an NSYNC boy? I mean, I know the answer is neither, but like if you had to.
No, but I think I liked Backstreet Boys more because the video for Everybody's Backstreet Back was like partially in a haunted house, and as like an Addams Family person, I was like, that's all I need to draw sides. Like one of them's a mummy.
That scans.
One of them's a werewolf.
Okay,
I'm on those guys' side now.
I think NSYNC covered That Thing You Do, and they did some Bee Gees songs too. And so that
was enough for you.
Yeah, that was enough for me. And then my girlfriend and her family, my girlfriend's sister has seen NSYNC / Justin Timberlake. It must be over 50 times. Like mega super fan.
She got some good bootlegs. Her Dick's picks for NSYNC shows. You really got to hear Tampa Bay 99, spring of May 99.
But they've convinced me that NSYNC has better vocal harmonies. And more complex, I should say, vocal harmonies.
Yeah. Whatever. Sure. I mean, we got Justin Timberlake out of NSYNC, right? So that's probably the I mean, they won, right? Backstreet Boys didn't get
Backstreet
any.
Boys are still together though. So
Well,
how
none
do
of
you
I have
define
anything to say
winning?
about it. Well, it's true. No, but they didn't like launch. There was like no like the AJ McLean solo career never materialized.
No, yeah.
I can't believe I
mean,
pulled that dude's name out of nowhere.
Yeah, I'm really impressed. Brian Luttrell.
He was the other one with the goatee. I think
He was the
had
blonde one. He was the blonde one who looked like he stuffed kids in the lockers. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more Too Much Information in just a moment.
And this brings us to the point at which TRL and the boy band, that really the teen pop era, and because I remember Britney and Christina on this just as much as them, but yeah, the teen pop late 90s, early aughts, and TRL achieve a perfect, like those wasps that lay eggs in caterpillars while they're still alive, and then they burst into the caterpillar and eat their brains.
I would say the fish that are in the shark's teeth,
yes,
clean out survive on the stuff that like the bits of meat in between the shark's teeth. Yeah,
they achieved a perfect symbiosis, which J.C. Chazé of NSYNC actually used, and not the whole disgusting animal metaphor, but they said they had a symbiotic relationship. Scholars of this period. Was that Maria Christina Sherman? Who are you citing there? Because I know she wrote a book about it.
She wrote a great book about boy bands, yes.
Yeah.
I just, anecdotally.
Okay.
Anecdotally.
Scholars of this period have speculated.
That sounded better than me saying, I Googled around a bit and I feel like.
Well, that's fair. I mean, yeah, it's just interesting because I think we had talked about how reality TV maybe killed off TRL, but I think it was really more like the ascent of hip hop into the mainstream. Because if you look at it, like the conventional arc of like mainstream chart narrative, right, is like grunge and then nu metal and teen pop and pop punk, and then sort of hip hop took over, and then it became like hip hop and R&B, and then like EDM influenced stuff, right? Like that's kind of the conventional wisdom that like hip hop and R&B became like the dominant things that influenced pop, and that killed off rock's influence on pop, right? And
well, I don't know why that would influence TRL. I mean, it was
because TRL didn't have a monopoly on black music on the air. They had BET in competition.
Oh, okay.
And that was kind of where I was going with that.
That's an interesting point that
because MTV was famously historically racist. They just didn't play black people. So as R&B, and I mean they were by this point, but you know, everyone's seen that thing about David Bowie being like, why won't MTV play black artists? Yeah, so I think that plays into it. But anyway, their dominant cultural moment came with the most lily white shit on earth, teen pop. And scholars of this period have speculated that had the show launched a year or so earlier with your sort of post-grunge fallout bands like Semisonic and Fastball, it would not have met with the same success that it did when they had bands like NSYNC and Backstreet Boys and 98 Degrees.
These personality-driven groups.
Mm-hmm. And the women of the era.
Yes.
By fall of 98, the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC's debut albums had sold a combined 30 million copies.
That's insane.
It is nuts. And you could see them on TRL every damn day. The very first countdown on the debut episode featured both of those bands, as we counted down earlier, battling over the top spot on the chart with I'll Never Break Your Heart and Tearing Up My Heart.
Two hearts
beating as one. That's fucked up, because didn't one of them have, I think Brian Luttrell had like open heart surgery at one point.
Yeah, you're right.
Up to that point, MTV hadn't really been paying boy band videos and only started once their fans mobilized and voted them onto TRL. AJ McLean later laughed about how the Quit Playing Games With My Heart video was very much not in line with MTV's image when it was first released, saying a bunch of guys in linen shirts dancing in the rain showing off their abs wasn't going to happen. But once the fans banded together and forced MTV's hand, they didn't have a choice. That is, you know, also the like Boys II Men model, but sure, AJ. Professor Gail Wald who teaches English and American Studies at George Washington University, is quoted as saying that the request aspect of TRL allowed, quote, girls to be able to see themselves as the authors of culture. They were pulling all the strings. The show became this really fun excuse for them to display their consumer power. Damien Fahey said that it was always bad news when he inadvertently chose a Backstreet Boys stand to introduce God Must Have Spent a Little More Time on You.
That's an NSYNC song.
An NSYNC song, yeah. Took me a second there. Carson also recalled an incident during a Battle of the Boy Bands trivia section where a Backstreet Boys stan named Tiffany lost and became enraged, saying that she was gonna kill her opponent and telling Carson, I'm gonna kill you too. That was a trick question.
It's a scary clip. She's like,
oh, those women were insane.
well,
they were like, this is where you get like, this is the seeds of stan culture. I mean, like, I know the Beatles and everything, but like, this is the first place I ever started seeing it before like Ed Sullivan stuff. It was like these girls, like, you know,
actually, no, I did see it on Sullivan first.
Yeah, of course you
because
did.
I grew up in the 50s, even though Beatles Anthology, baby, 95, 3 years before TRL.
As we alluded to earlier, Dave Holmes called the Battle of the Boy Bands in favor. Well, he called it a wash. He says the Backstreet Boys are still alive and touring, and although NSYNC is no more, they did produce, he said, the man who is still our biggest worldwide cultural phenomenon. I speak, of course, of Lance Bass. And then he said, I call it a draw.
Fellow iHeart podcaster Lance Bass.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's got a show called Frosted, as in Frost Tips.
Frosted
Tips.
Tips.
He sits down, interviews fellow boy banders. Good show. Lance, come on our show. We'll do No Strings Attached. Wait, that is NSYNC, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And as we mentioned earlier, you cannot talk about the teen pop phenomenon and TRL without discussing Britney Spears, who was dubbed the official first lady of TRL during the show's TRL Awards in 2003, which was the year that she performed for the first time on the show, singing In the Zone in the middle of Times Square with the Yin Yang Twins.
God.
While Will Ferrell held up a sign from the audience declaring his undying love. There are so many things that are bizarre about that sentence I just read. It took until 2003 for her to perform on the show?
Perform, yeah. She was on it a bunch.
Yeah. Was Will Ferrell promoting Elf?
I think, yeah.
And the Yin Yang Twins. Whither
Just
the Yin Yang
there.
Twins. She appeared on the show a reported 14 times over the course of its decade-long run, initially as a 17-year-old on December 18th, 1998, where she debuted her music video for Baby One More Time. During future appearances, she would co-host with Melissa Joan Hart, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, right?
She was in the movie Drive Me Crazy, for which Britney Spears did the title track.
Melissa Joan Hart, man. Wow.
What else did Britney Spears do during her many appearances on TRL, Heigl?
With Melissa Joan Hart. No, she discussed her crush on Brad Pitt. She discussed her relationship with Justin Timberlake, who she called her first puppy love boyfriend, and she debuted her belly button piercing in 2000. Remember that? When that was a thing? You pulled a particularly... why do either of us have to read this sentence? Method Man of Wu-Tang Clan and The Wire recalled...
Yeah.
He's great in The Wire.
Less great on TRL, as we'll find out.
Yes, he recalled crossing paths with Britney during a 1999 appearance on the show. As they posed for a picture after filming Wrapped, he says that he leaned over and whispered into Britney's ears, "You got a fat ass for a white girl." You got a fat ass for a white girl. You got a fat ass for a white girl.
Take three.
You got a fat ass for a white girl. You
All
got
right, Heigl, we're going for lunch.
you got fat ass for a white girl. You got a fat ass for a white girl. Britney, ever the professional, waited until the photo was taken before replying, "Thank you."
Oh, God.
Bless your heart.
That's an incredible Britney impression.
And Method Man offered a polite, "You're welcome." Like Frost Nixon of the aughts. Recalling the meeting on Rap Fix in 2011, he said that he meant it as a compliment. I'm telling the truth, Brittany.
I think there's a documentary that came out in like 2011 or 2012 called The TRL Decade that I think VH1, the Rock Docs imprint, put out, which has now been like scrubbed from the internet. I was trying to find it in preparation for this, but it was a really good documentary. And I think Method Man is one of the talking heads on there, and he's very, very proudly recounts this anecdote.
Oh, boy.
Well, this incident, unsavory as it is, brings us to another crucial point. It's important, so deeply important, to remember that popular music in the late 90s and early 2000s was so much more than the teen pop craze. TRL boasted an impressive array of music, from Linkin Park and My Chemical Romance and Avril Lavigne to R&B and hip-hop acts like Jay-Z, Diddy, Mariah Carey, and Destiny's Child. New metal and pop-punk acts especially took a perverse pleasure in appearing on TRL. Derek Whibley of Sum 41 likened it to, quote, planting our flag on enemy ground. I remember the very first time we were on TRL, O-Town or something like that was on there. And I remember we were just making fun of them as we were about to come out or something. So that was just the vibe for us, to go on there and sort of spit in the face of everybody else, of all the pop bands that were on there. Show creator Bob Cusbit likened the metal versus boy band face-off to, quote, the heels versus the baby faces in pro wrestling. Taylor Hanson of the Hansons recalls sitting in the TRL green room chowing down on Chex Mix with Fred Durst.
Oh, God.
It's quite an image, quite a juxtaposition. But he noted how not weird it was because, quote, the thing about those situations is we all have the same job. We tour and we play music. Many of these meetings were preserved thanks to the in-studio photo booth that served as a sort of visual guest book for TRL. Over the course of the 10 seasons, over 200 celebrities popped in, ranging from Insane Clown Posse and Cisco to Muhammad Ali and John McCain. Sadly, I don't believe together.
I was going to say
I don't think so. Yeah, all crammed in
together. Do a funny one now.
And if you're interested in such early 2000s oddities, the best images have been compiled into a coffee table book, which I believe is available on eBay.
Did you know that the NYPD broke up the Insane Clown Posse, the Juggalos?
On TRL?
Yeah.
Why?
This is in 2000 when they were trying to get a single called Let's Go All the Way, and MTV agreed to play it once in the evening, and then they decided to mobilize the Juggalos to get it on TRL.
Mobilizing the Juggalos is never a good thing.
Nearly 400 ICP fans standing outside of TRL with signs supporting the duo, and Viacom and the NYPD cleared all of them off and got into altercations with the police. All telephone requests for the video to be played were ignored, and Insane Clown Posse were never mentioned again during the show. MTV later informed the group's label, Island Records, that the heads of the network must choose the band first before it can become eligible to be featured on TRL. So there you have it, the TRL ICP feud.
Well, we discussed Fred Durst a moment ago, and we cannot mention the Limp Bizkit frontman without discussing his most memorable moment on TRL, which took place on Memorial Day 1999, when he kicked off the summer by blowing up a sailboat in the middle of his performance of Nookie.
Y'all ready to blow this boat up?
Do you remember this? I actually do.
Really?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was a pyro. I was a little kid, so yeah, this was interesting to me, yeah. This was shot on location at the Isle of MTV, a.k.a. the Bahamas, and the whole deal was that the crowd and the TRL team were now stranded on the island for the summer because he blew this boat up. Perhaps not coincidentally, this was also the summer of Woodstock 99. So where Fred Durst went, explosions and fire followed. And now as we move into our celebrity incident grab bag segment of our TRL episode, I also want to recognize Korn, whose videos were so reliably stalled at the number 3 spot, often behind boy bands, that producers on TRL nicknamed number 3 the Korn spot on their countdown. And they were such mainstays that they were invited to the TRL 3-hour finale in 2008, where they were approached by an 18-year-old Taylor Swift, who asked them to sign her commemorative yearbook by gushing, "I'm a huge Korn fan." which is second only to me interviewing Korn a few years ago and saying something similar and equally disingenuous.
Did you say you were a huge Korn fan?
I didn't say huge.
I said A.
I would have never said that.
Oh, man. I cannot think of a funnier band for you to interview. Was it on Zoom or in person?
So,
Ah,
well, you can listen to it.
no, I was hoping it was in the studio.
No.
Were they scary to you?
No, they weren't. Most.
No, I meant at this
remember-
era. I remember being frightened of them.
Oh,
I thought
at
they
this
were like,
era. Oh, certainly.
yeah.
Oh, in like 1998? Yeah, absolutely. Oh, my God. Yeah. But that's the thing about like both metal fans and metal bands. I remember in one of my last assignments at VH1, so this would have been like 2015, I went on a Motorhead's Motorboat Metal Cruise as like the sole non-metal head on the ship. And I was terrified. And I looked so obviously lost and out of place that I just was immediately, I felt like I was like a ward of the state on this ship.
Yeah,
All these metal fans were
are
so
nice.
sweet. Were
Yeah.
so sweet. Oh my God. I learned so much. Yeah, it was really cool. I interviewed Slayer on that, and Kerry King was a big sweetheart. Yeah, it was nice. Anyway, right before Lemmy died, actually. Yeah, I interviewed Lemmy
Aw.
too. Yeah. He gave up in the interest of health. He gave up his trademark whiskey and Coke in favor
Yep.
of something more healthy, which was orange juice and
Orange
vodka.
juice and vodka. Yeah, screwdrivers. I remember reading about that.
God bless.
Oh, man.
Anyway, now we are going to run down some of the most memorable moments from TRL's glory years in no particular order. Diddy's appearances on TRL were always memorable, and he was usually down for whatever because his offices at the time were directly across the street in Times Square. And TRL co-creator Bob Cusbit recalls calling him a moment's notice once and saying to him, "Hey, we want to play a game where we spin the wheel, like Wheel of Fortune, and it lands on your office, and we move the entire TRL audience across the street to your office." Diddy's response? Sold. But for my money, Diddy's most memorable appearance took place on October 22nd, 2003, when he was supposedly in the midst of training for the New York City Marathon. And rather than compromise his busy exercise regimen, he spent the entire hour-long episode on a treadmill, randomly shouting out the names of products he was endorsing, while fellow guest Britney Spears wiped the sweat from his brow with a towel. We don't get television like that anymore. That's good stuff.
Sure don't.
Yeah. His commitment to the bit was so total that he kept jogging even during commercial breaks.
Do you know what his time in the New York City Marathon was?
I don't know.
4 hours, 14 minutes, and 54 seconds.
That sounds fast for
Yeah, it's not terrible. Do you know what?
Yeah.
His goal was to finish in under 4 hours, which he did not. But his other goal, this is according to Billboard in 2003, his other goal was to beat Oprah Winfrey's time when she ran the U.S. Marine Corps Marathon in 1994. And her time was 4 hours, 29 minutes. So he succeeded in half of his goals. While the men's winner did 2 hours, 10 minutes. So Diddy was a little under double that. So still pretty good, all things considered.
I was going to say, yeah.
Did Joe Strummer win the marathon? Or not win. Did Joe Strummer finish the marathon?
When he went to Paris?
Paris, yeah.
Was this when he like ran away? Like Joe Strummer just like vanished for a period and then he surfaced
Yeah.
in Paris having trained to run the Paris Marathon?
It says he ran it after drinking 10 beers. But yeah, he vanished from being in the Clash. He apparently ran twice in the London Marathon. Oh, he didn't finish the Paris one.
Disappointing.
Quitter.
Mm.
Calling Joe Strummer a quitter.
Well, an appearance that was even more surreal on TRL, simply by virtue of his presence, was when Prince dropped by in 1999. Apparently Prince, or rather the artist formerly known as Prince, wasn't really feeling it either because he showed up to promote his album Rave Unto the Joy Fantastic 10 minutes before the show was about to end. And considering the entire episode of TRL was supposed to be dedicated just to him, this caused some problems. Dave Holmes remembers him showing up with a massive entourage, including a guy whose sole job seemed to be holding a massive plastic tub that had previously been used to hold cheese balls or something. but instead now it had a handwritten sign on it that said swear jar, and if you took the Lord's name in vain, you had to throw some coins in. And the interview with Carson Daly and Prince got off to an awkward start when Carson dared to say to Prince, we were expecting you a little earlier, so there's a lot we have to get through. We don't have a lot of time. And Prince said, I don't use time. And Carson, to his credit, had a good response. So what do you use? And Prince paused for a moment before replying, truth.
Don't ever try and get in a staring contest with Prince. He will not blink.
And Carson, clearly admired Prince, and he was obviously embarrassed that he was presenting, an artist of Prince's stature on a teen-centric music show. And he tried his best to gas Prince up by saying, in an age of disposable music, it's great to have. And then Prince immediately cuts him off. An age of what? And Carson tried to explain himself. An age when music seems to come and go, or music lasts for a couple of weeks sometimes. To which Prince hit back with, you don't promote any of that disposable music, do you? And from this point on, Prince spent the remainder of the interview pushing Carson's buttons, asking him stuff like, do you like the music you're playing? And, this makes me admire Carson because be on live TV and have an artist like Prince coming for you. That's not easy, but he handled it like a champ. He said, hey man, if I'm the bartender and I don't like Jack and Cokes, I still have to serve it up to people because that's my job. It's a good response. As TRL's profile grew bigger, it became a semi-mandatory press stop for artists, and it attracted a number of divas. Prince was just one of them. Damien Fahey recalled a stressful appearance by Madonna early in his tenure on the show. And prior to this, Madonna had requested Carson to do all of her interviews, and if not him, with some old-school MTV News mainstay like John Norris or Kurt Loder, because they were, old friends from the 80s when Madonna was just starting out. Instead, this time around, she was stuck with the new guy, Damien Fahey, and she was reportedly very against it. And MTV had to work very hard to convince her to let him do the interview. Damien told a story in an interview with E! News in 2018. Madonna comes backstage with her 10-person entourage. There's a person employed in her entourage, and their only job appeared to be just to hold a bottle of champagne and to pour champagne into champagne flutes just before she goes on television. So I went up to her to break the ice and said, hi, I'm Damien. It's an honor to get to do this. I'm really, really nervous, just to let you know off the bat. And she said, I'm really nervous too. I get so nervous doing these things. And that's why the champagne. Do you want a glass of champagne? And I said, from your champagne person? Yeah, sure. And so I drank a glass of champagne with Madonna before I went out. Madonna was not alone. Executive producer Tim Heigl told The Ringer a lot of celebrities were a little bit intimidated by coming on TRL for a couple reasons. One, it was live, and two, you're standing in front of a studio audience of screaming girls, and nobody wants to come off as out of touch. A lot of them came in with an attitude of, help me, I don't want to go out there and look lame. One of those who did in fact go out there and look lame was, unfortunately, Celine Dion, who was cited by several TRL insiders as one of the most awkward guests in the show's history. Comedian Paul Scheer said, quote, the audience is just not into her at all. She's making jokes like a dad who's like, hey guys, I drink beer too. And this is all so weird because she would have been like 30 at this time. She was born in 1968. So she wasn't like, she's 5 years younger than us now.
Yeah, but Canada 30 is like US 45.
No, okay, that's fair. Among the... sure. Among the fellow nerve-stricken celebrities was Brad Pitt, who reportedly paced backstage absolutely terrified prior to being shoved out in front of the camera. Brad Pitt's 5 years older than Celine Dion. Isn't that weird?
That is weird. I would not have picked that
right?
up.
I know, yeah.
There were some very willing celebrities who were turned down. One of them was Harrison Ford, of all people, who would have been doing what exactly? 6 days, 7 nights?
7 nights? That seems like an MTV-friendly thing.
According to Bob Kousbit, Harrison Ford wanted to come on. We were all massive fans, but we knew the kid who wanted to see Justin Timberlake might not buy into Harrison.
How do you feel about that? You're a big Star Wars fan.
No, I guess that's scans. When did the movies come back out? They were re-released in
99.
No, the prequel is 99. The re-release was 97.
Oh. But I mean, come on. There's Air Force One. There's The Fugitive. A Fugitive rules. What do you laugh at the Fugitive? I can't believe you laugh at the Fugitive.
Fugitive does roll with the idea of like a teeny bopper holding up a sign that's like, Harrison Ford, I'll be your fugitive. You have to admit, that's accurate to me.
Oh, I disagree, but okay.
Even more confusing, Mel Gibson was invited onto the show.
See, that's what I mean. I mean, maybe must have been What Women Want era, but
I was going to say it had to have been for What Women Want. Oh, man. And he found it challenging to connect with the teen audience and was in a monosyllabic mood the entire time. For one of the recurring bits on the show, producers asked him to draw a self-portrait, and he complied, but underneath wrote, "I offer you my decrepit soul," which that feels like a me thing. But it's as close as I'm going to get to Mel Gibson. Everyone, by the way, I'm going to quickly distance myself there. And speaking of decrepit souls,
friend of the pod, decrepit souls.
Damien Fahey may have shared a nice little moment with Madonna, but he has less fond memories of Donald Trump's appearance on the show at the peak of Apprentice Mania. They were shooting a comedy bit for a cold open where Trump was firing the camera guy, and he basically acted like a tyrant for real. Damien Fahey later told Billboard, "Before we started, Trump goes, no. This isn't happening. I need that camera to stand on an Apple box. I don't like a low camera." He said something about how it didn't make him look good. "I remember this phrase specifically. I'm a guy who likes a high camera. That's not a thing." He was a total egomaniac monster. On a similar note, we cannot forget the moment when Ben Affleck sexually assaulted the host Hillary Burton on camera in front of a live audience. Tom Cruise. Everyone loved him.
Everyone loves Tom Cruise.
He came by the show in 2003 and went hard for Joss Stone, the bronze medalist of British white soul singers.
She was before them all, though. Of that class.
Well, I was going to say Dusty Springfield begs to differ.
No,
yeah, I guess that's true. Anyway, the day following his appearance, the MTV offices got a giant box full of Joss Stone's debut CD with a note reading something like, "Check it out. Love, Tom Cruise." Like, they wouldn't have had those. That's what I love, is it being like, yeah, they probably don't have those. Let me go above and beyond for them.
And then they got a box a couple days later with one of Shelley Miscavige's fingers.
VJ Lala Anthony recalled that Tom asked her to teach him to twerk on air. Okay. Yeah, it seems like something he'd try.
Yeah. He was very down in this era, I feel like. With anything. I feel like he was just down to go on TV and do whatever. Like, this was prime couch jumping era, I believe.
Yeah, I guess that's true. As the boy band craze began to fade a few years into the new millennium, MTV began to focus more on hip-hop, Nelly's, 50 Cent, Eminem, and of course, Jay-Z. Jay-Z and Beyonce made what many scholars of the era believed to be their debut as a couple during a November 2002 episode of TRL when they performed "Oh 3 Bonnie and Clyde" in semi-matching denim outfits, which may or may not have been a nod to Justin Brittany's iconic denim cowpoke look, which was not at the MTV VMAs. That was at the American Music Awards. Destiny's Child made their farewell appearance on a 2005 episode of TRL. They had announced the breakup during a stop in Spain on their tour, supporting their album Destiny Fulfilled, admitting that title was not an accident. And then they sent a follow-up letter to MTV explaining the decision before stopping by TRL to say goodbye to fans who were given an opportunity to tell what this meant to them. One young woman named Dominique gave a tearful thanks to the group for inspiring her to dance and pursue her dreams in college.
Mm-hmm. That's nice. Even Beyonce gets teary. It's just like the most emotional I've ever seen her. Can I say that? Is that, I don't know if it's true. Well, it's impossible to underestimate TRL's role in launching Eminem. They debuted his video for "My Name Is" on January 21st, 1999, setting the stage for his first appearance on the show 6 weeks later. And this was a pivotal moment in TRL's history because it showed that this platform had the power not merely to launch prepackaged teen acts, but also more controversial artists that are kind of a harder sell to the public at large. Eminem had a complicated relationship with TRL. While he appreciated that it allowed him to interact with fans, hence his tearful response to seeing the crowds that lined Times Square, he was also uncomfortable with the showbiz element of it. Damien Fahey later said, "I remember Eminem sitting on the couch by himself, sort of head down, like he didn't want to talk to anybody. I was just like, oh, that's a man who doesn't want to talk to anyone, so I think I'm just going to leave him alone. But then, he gets out there and he's debonair." Eminem even took over hosting duties in 2000 to promote the release of the Marshall Mathers LP, memorably banishing Carson Daly to the sidewalk outside. And also he showed off his Olympic-class self-deprecation by telling fans, "My album sucks." I appreciate that. Eminem famously started lyrical feuds with many of the TRL heavy hitters, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, and Limp Bizkit, to name but a few. But he used his time on TRL to start a real-life feud with Mark Wahlberg, which is something that I truly don't remember. But apparently Mark Wahlberg was in the midst of trying to launch his acting career in 1999. This must have been just after Boogie Nights. And he really wanted to separate himself from his Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch rap career in the early 90s. Eminem was not going to let this rebrand fly. When Mark asked where he should stand when he came onto the live TV set, Eminem told him, "We'll just all stand together like a happy, fun bunch," which was just a little too close to comfort to Mark's rap past. A close listen to the interview will reveal Mark muttering "ass" under his breath. Eminem would take another dig at Marky Mark on his 2000 Marshall Mathers LP track Drug Ballad, which features the line, "Back when Mark Wahlberg was Marky Mark," followed by a homophobic slur. Amazingly, Mark Wahlberg backed down. Not something that I ever expect Mark Wahlberg to do. In a 2017 interview with GQ, he said, "Eminem is a very cool guy, very talented. Yes, I did not give him credit for that a very long time ago, but I was a hater because he was a better rapper than me," which is true. But the TRL crowd loved Marky Mark. Vanessa Minnillo, who met her husband Nick Lachey when she was a VJ on the show between 2005 and 2006, recalled interviewing Mark Wahlberg when a girl in the audience rushed the stage during a live broadcast and checked Vanessa out of the way. She told E! News in 2018, "All of a sudden I'm interviewing Mark Wahlberg and you hear this thump and both of us look to the left and this girl jumped out of the bleachers. I run behind Mark Wahlberg. Later on, everybody made fun of me. They said, 'It's your show. You should protect him.' But I'm like, he's Marky Mark. The guy has a 30-pack and muscles. What am I going to do to protect him?" So I ran behind him. This woman jumps up and hockey checks me out of the way and then just bear hugs him. And again, he's Mark Wahlberg, but he couldn't pull her grip off of him. And I was like, "We're going for a short break. We'll be right back. Bye." Security had to pry this woman off of him, and MTV tried to persuade Mark to press charges, but he refused. And as Mark later admitted during his final TRL appearance in 2008, he wasn't bothered by the encounter except for one minor detail. He said, quote, "The one thing that was disturbing was she had a pin on that said, 'God is not real,' and I still pray for her."
That's really the best quote out of this.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more Too Much Information in just a moment.
And now we've arrived what surely must be the most infamous moment in TRL history. July 19th, 2001, when the TRL studios had an unexpected visitor in the form of Mariah Carey. Over the last 20 years, this moment has earned a justifiable, probably, reputation as the nadir of her mental health struggles during the glitter era. And it's actually pretty tame.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not like, I guess maybe we've just become so desensitized to
on-air mental illness.
Yeah, especially with social media now.
Yeah. I mean, well, I don't know. Do you want to expand on that?
I mean, I don't know. This is pre-Amy Winehouse, pre-Britney Spears, pre-Paris Hilton, Lindsay Lohan struggling with substance abuse problems. I mean, yeah, it just feels like, I don't know, she kind of did something a little kooky. but like
Yeah.
within the realm of like, I don't know, giving out ice cream to fans. I don't know. It's just, and she took off a t-shirt to reveal another shirt underneath. Like, I don't know. It just kind of seems like, all right. I mean, I'm sad that, as we'll hear in a moment, she like was getting 3 hours of sleep at this time and suffered from severe insomnia as a result of what was most certainly undiagnosed bipolar disorder at that time. But yeah, in terms of what she did, not that crazy.
Yeah, for those of you who do not remember the moment, Carson is getting ready to cut to commercial, and then he hears Mariah off stage singing Loverboy and says with genuine bewilderment, "What the hell is that?"
It's pretty great. That's actually my favorite part.
And then Mariah comes on stage pushing her ice cream cart, hugs a bunch of fans, waves to the crowd, takes off her t-shirt, which has another t-shirt under it, tells Carson, every now and then somebody needs a little therapy, and today is that moment for me. And then she talks a little bit about ice cream. She's saying ice cream is important. It's the little things. You can have drama all day long, whatever. We all do these things. But the problem is, if you don't have ice cream in your life, sometimes you might just go a little bit crazy.
She just wanted a little sweetness in her life. It's like actually pretty tender when you step back.
It's that line from Psycho. Do we all go a little crazy sometimes?
Oh, God.
She went on to tell Carson, I just want one day off when I can go swimming and eat ice cream and look at rainbows and maybe like learn how to ride a bicycle.
Aww.
She told another interview around the same time period that she suffered from insomnia, was getting about 3 hours of sleep at night. As you mentioned, a probable symptom of her bipolar disorder that she discussed with People magazine in 2018. She had been on TRL just 2 weeks earlier to promote the upcoming soundtrack to the film Glitter. Were they released on the same time?
I thought they were. I think what happened was after this incident, they actually delayed the release of Glitter by 3 weeks, pretty much as a direct response to this incident.
Right. And so when she showed up this time around, they had to figure out what they wanted to do differently. Producer Deidre Connolly told The Ringer, it was sort of like, okay, how does this appearance become different than her being here last week or 2 weeks ago or whatever? Oh, you could bring ice cream out and surprise the fans. They won't know that you're here. It's special. And it kind of grew out of that idea, that kind of mixing it up. This was more spontaneous. I actually think, frankly, as we were watching it, I don't think that we would have anticipated talking about it 15 years later. It seemed like, oh, fun. This is interesting. This is different. It wasn't like, oh my God, what's happening? But days after the appearance, Carrie had begun posting troubling voice notes to her website. One of them read, I'm trying to understand things in life right now, so I don't really feel that I should be doing music right now. What I'd like to do is just take a little break or at least get one night of sleep without someone popping up about a video. All I really want is to just be me, and that's what I should have done in the first place. I don't say this much, but guess what? I don't take care of myself. Aww. Her management quickly scrubbed the messages from her website, commenting that she was obviously exhausted and not thinking clearly when she posted them. Within days of the TRL appearance, Carrie's publicist had told MTV that she was hospitalized in Connecticut with extreme exhaustion, remaining in a doctor's care for 2 weeks, and she stayed out of the spotlight for months afterwards. And as you mentioned, the release of Glitter was delayed for 3 weeks to 9/11.
I think a little after 9/11. Well, back to the music. Mariah Carey has more than her share of music chart milestones over the years, including the record for the most number ones by a solo artist. So this seems like a good a way as any to transition into TRL's heaviest hitters. The producers of the show found that one of the hazards of having a daily request countdown show was that the same songs were topping the chart week after week after week. To ensure a little more variety, they instituted a rule that any video that spent 65 days on the countdown was to be sent to the video retirement home. And as much as I'd love to give you a Moneyball-like stat breakdown of all the retired videos and the longest running TRL chart records, it was actually pretty hard to run these numbers down. The most detailed sites are actually old GeoCities or Angel Fire pages that stop around 2004. And it appears that many of the other fan sites devoted to tallying these stats have fallen victim to the dreaded digital rot. So I believe, I can't say this with absolute certainty, but I think there were 165 videos that were retired and honorably removed from TRL competition. But Again, I have been unable to definitively peg that. However, I have been able to confirm that the longest running number one in TRL history is Shape of My Heart by the Backstreet Boys, which ran for 61 days at the top of the charts. And this is according to Grammy.com and MTV.com, who also state that Backstreet Boys have 5 of the 6 longest running video number ones of all time. The silver medal is Larger Than Life. And a Backstreet Boys fan site have said that they have 10 different number one songs on TRL. Other long-running number ones on TRL are Bye 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 by NSYNC, which comes in at number 3. Yeah by Usher, featuring Little John and Ludacris, hit the top spot 30 times. And The Anthem by Good Charlotte was number 1 for 29 days. That is strange. Huh. I don't remember The Anthem as being that big of a song, but okay.
Yeah, I would have thought it was, what's that obnoxious song, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous?
Oh, yeah. Well, we can't talk about TRL video retirement without mentioning the Bum Bum song. Yes, Tom Green's absurdist-ass anthem hit the top spot on August 27th, 1999, after just 5 days on TRL. And no sooner did it hit number 1 did Tom opt to retire the video, telling TRL, quote, "It's not fair to 98 Degrees." However, years later in his autobiography, Hollywood Causes Cancer, Tom revealed that he'd been pressured to withdraw the video because that next week's shows had been pre-taped on location, and the producers didn't think to include the Bum Bum song in its rotation when they taped them in advance. So in order to preserve the illusion that TRL was a completely live show, Tom had to take a dive. And then Drew Barrymore left him. Tough breaks all around. Well, speaking of retirement, we got to talk about Carson Daly stepping down as the host of TRL. He remained with the show until 2003, its 5th year of existence, by which point he'd gotten basically too busy trying to make the leap from teen TV to late-night adult television with NBC's Last Call with Carson Daly, which ran from January 2002 all the way until May 2019. And then he parlayed that into a correspondent gig on The Today Show and producing and hosting The Voice, as well as an occasional NBC New Year's Eve host. So he did good. Carson explained his reasons for leaving TRL in an interview with E! News in 2018. "I left because MTV really made a decision to stop focusing on music, and that's why I was there. So in my time, I'll always cherish it for the artists that we were able to break. We took My Name Is, the Eminem video, pretty much away from the music department, and TRL owned it and stood behind Eminem, who we felt was going to be an important artist, when even MTV wouldn't. Those sorts of things are things I'm really proud of. I always wanted TRL to feel like my home. Even if it was videos MTV wasn't playing, I wanted to make sure that artists knew that TRL was their home. And it had that feel. And then I stopped watching." So when Carson left in 2003, this left MTV executives with the unenviable task of finding a new TRL host. And apparently they initially considered Nick Cannon. They tried to get him on board as the new Carson, but he was too busy trying to get his movie career off the ground, which, was he in Drumline? I'm trying to remember what he was in. Yeah, that's kind of all I remember. TRL co-creator Tony DeSanto later said, "When Carson left the show, I was reluctant to replace him because I thought no matter how good any host was, stepping into that role would invite immediate comparisons. And knowing that it takes a while for a host to get into a rhythm on a show like this, I didn't want undue negative attention to derail that process. The show, of course, had to go on, so what I decided then was not to replace Carson with a host, but rather have TRL reconfigured to be hosted by an ensemble, each bringing something new to the table." And that's when you get Damien Fahey, Hillary Burton, Vanessa Lachey, who was then known as Vanessa Manillo, Quidis, who I'm not familiar, Lala Anthony, who was then known as Lala Vasquez, and Susie Castillo. I don't remember her either. Despite this whole hosting by committee edict, Damien Fahey was basically seen as Carson 2.0, and he admitted as much, later telling E! News, "I was seen by other people as, Carson's leaving. This is the new white guy with the exact same facial hair and the same height as Carson. He's going to be the next Carson." And this fostered a bit of competition between the VJs, which, though stopping short of an all-out feud, seemed to add kind of a weird energy to the set.
A sexual one?
Sure.
It's generally accepted that the glory days of TRL ended with Carson's departure. In 2003, Backstreet Boys were on decline, NSYNC had already broken up, and perhaps, most importantly, the internet was becoming more prevalent, making it easy to access music, and then following the launch of YouTube in February of 2005, videos instantly. You no longer had to call into a TV network to see your favorite video. All you had to do was Google it or go to their MySpace. MySpace, yeah, because that would probably been the other
Friendster?
thing.
Oh, yeah.
No, just because MySpace, like my high school band experience was like getting in touch with like bands on MySpace. Like the like emo DIY punk MySpace thing was huge. Because you remember like MySpace had so much music linked into it that Facebook didn't, because you could have songs playing and you could have all the customizing of the page. So no, not a thing for you.
I didn't really. I didn't have a MySpace, which I'm sure is shocking to no one. So I didn't really know what you could and couldn't do with it. I mean, the most that I really knew as a way to personalize your social media at that point with anything related to music was, away messages with song lyrics.
No, I remember it being a big thing of like bands that were coming to like the all ages venue, like finding out that they were on MySpace and like in charge of their own site, and people like, I mean, this is like
that kind of rings a bell, like 2004, 2005.
Yeah. And then finding out that they just used it to scam underage girls. In a sense, MTV was a victim of its own I want my MTV ethos. The public wanted what it wanted when it wanted it. This sowed the seeds for kids no longer using linear television at all, but consuming media on demand on their computers and eventually phones, eliminating the appeal for a show that aired at one specific time. Even TRL's ability to premiere music videos was undercut by videos frequently leaking online, eliminating any urgency to tune into the show. By the time YouTube had launched in 2005, TRL's viewership sagged to 400,000, half of what it had been in its prime 6 years earlier. To put that in perspective, at the time, The Hills was getting 4 million, or 10 times TRL's numbers. And then Osbourne's was what, 2001? 2002? That's the other big thing at this time. TRL didn't exactly do themselves any favors when they stopped playing full music videos around the time, which brought back the old cries of, why isn't MTV playing music? They also instituted changes in the video selection process in 2006 as the longtime phone hotline was discontinued and voting was limited to registered members of MTV.com. That was a great decision. Damien Fahey later said, there were a lot of these meetings. We're not getting the ratings we used to get. Kids want the multi-screen, multi-platform experience. Once we started trying to make the show like the internet, I said, oh God, this isn't good. Smart man.
Yeah.
The only other thing that TRL really had going for it was the chance to see your favorite artists relatively unfiltered during their interviews, and this was overtaken by the increasingly prevalent reality shows on MTV, which, as we mentioned on our episode about the Osbourne, was their doing. By the mid-2000s, MTV began de-emphasizing music and music videos in favor of original reality programming that signaled their attempts at becoming a lifestyle network. These shows were doing 10 times the numbers that TRL was getting. Hence the glut of things like My Super Sweet 16, Laguna Beach, The Real Orange County, Making the Band, and of course, Jersey Shore.
But it's important to remember that YouTube wasn't just a delivery mechanism for labels, but also a platform for creators.
Yes, and this is when you get the era of the clickbait music video, when basically bands are taking the reins of their own video creation and distribution into their own hands. You get stuff like OK Go's video for Here It Goes Again, getting 40 million streams on YouTube with barely any help from MTV. And so by the late 2000s, it became obvious that MTV was no longer necessary to break songs or even artists. YouTube stars, social media stars, became the new dominant order of music celebrity. David George, the show's final executive producer, told Billboard, I knew the show was done when Justin Bieber came around. He was the first mega artist who was not broken by TRL. He broke TRL. He proved TRL was no longer necessary.
It's really kind of crazy to think about how long TRL survived in a world that really had no use for it. I mean, it survived until 2008.
Well, like late night television.
Well, yeah. I mean, at least late night television is kind of like a breeding ground for like viral video clips. TRL is the opposite. TRL was a extremely inconvenient place to cull things that you could just watch on the internet anytime you wanted. TRL survived until 2008, but 3 years of YouTube and 1 year of iPhones had taken its toll. And on November 16th of that year, TRL wrapped up its initial run after 10 years and 2,247 episodes.
When did the iPhone come out?
2007, summer 2007.
Far out.
I know, right?
That is not my memory of it.
Oh,
I don't think I started seeing.
Oh, I remember that very well.
Oh man, I don't think I started seeing kids have them until like 2010, 2010.
I knew a few people. They were always like the very, cutting edge of technology people had them around like 2009. I remember. Are we better off? No. But at least TRL went out with a bang, which is more that could be said for a lot of the network's most beloved programs like The Osbournes, Jackass, Beavis and Butthead, etc. MTV did TRL right and said farewell with a star-studded 3-hour special, which struck many as akin to a high school graduation. Carson Daly came back, as did a host of other MTV VJs, including Jesse Camp, who'd basically fallen out of the spotlight at this point and was last heard from as working at an LA pet shop in 2006. Beyonce kicked off proceedings by striding into the studio and declaring, "Total Finale Live starts now," before performing a medley of her hits that included If I Were a Boy, Single Ladies, and Crazy in Love. There were also performances by Fall Out Boy, Ludacris, Nelly, Backstreet Boys, Snoop Dogg, and 50 Cent, and a whole slew of TRL stars of the new and old era turned up to say goodbye. You had Taylor Swift, Hilary Duff, and Miley Cyrus representing the new guard, with Taylor collecting autographs in her TRL yearbook and Miley Cyrus manning the famous photo booth. It's so weird to think of Taylor Swift overlapping with the TRL era, but I guess she did, yeah. There were also Korn, Kid Rock, Diddy, Justin Timberlake, and JC Chazé representing the old guard of TRL, and Good Charlotte, the middle guard. What'd you say, 2003, 2004? Yeah. Eminem and Christina Aguilera made appearances via satellite, and Justin Timberlake told Carson, this is like a big high school reunion. I feel like we all grew up together. And the final show allowed fans to vote on the top 10 most iconic videos ever. And all videos were released from the retirement home and up for consideration at this point. So let's do a little countdown now. Number 10, 2003, Outkast's Hey Ya. You alternate. You take 9.
1999, Blink-182, What's My Age Again?
Number 8, from 2004, Usher featuring Ludacris and Lil Jon, Yeah.
Number 7, 2003, Beyonce featuring Jay-Z, Crazy in Love.
That should have been higher. Number 6, from 1999, Kid Rock. I can't even say it. Ba Wida Ba Ba.
Ba Wida Ba Ba.
Thank you.
No. Not at all.
Wait, I'm going to get this.
You don't remember? Ba Wida Ba. Da bang, diggy, diggy.
But I mean, I know the song. I just can't say it.
Sound it out.
Ba with a ba. Okay, I got it. Thank you. All right, carry on. Number 5.
Christina Aguilera featuring Redman, Dirty, from 2002.
Number 4, from 2000, NSYNC's Bye Bye Bye. That should have been a lot higher too. Wow.
Number 3, 1999, Backstreet Boys, I Want It That Way.
Number 2, from 2000, Eminem's The Real Slim Shady.
And number 1, justifiably, 1998.
Deservedly.
Britney Spears, Baby One More Time.
Hell yeah. And then it was over. At the end of 2009, MTV abandoned the lease on their iconic Times Square studio, and within a year, it was part of an Aeropostale, which is how it was when I first arrived at MTV for my first day on the job.
What is it now?
In 2009. It went back to being, MTV eventually reclaimed the studio space at some point during my time there. And then when they relaunched TRL in 2017, they, I think, used the same studios. And I think now it's just, I believe it's an MTV studio still. I'm not sure what it's used for, but.
It's the M&M store.
Yeah. But yes, I just mentioned the TRL reboot, which, I had friends who worked on that, so I will, for the most part, plead the fifth. I will say It was an idea whose time had passed, long since passed by 2017. And the reboot failed for all the reasons that TRL went off the air in 2008. There's no reason for that type of show to exist anymore. Allow me to quote from a Vulture article called "Why Does the TRL Reboot Exist?" written by D. Lockett. The piece includes a series of questions. Why does this show exist? Who is this show for? Where is the countdown? What are we even supposed to request? Will it always have this much bleeping? Why do they talk about Carson Daly like he's dead? How will the show handle serious news? How will it pretend the internet doesn't exist? This piece is unable to answer any of these questions, hence why the new version of TRL became watered down and mutated out of existence. We touched on this at the top of the episode, but there are many who feel that the decade TRL aired from 1998 to 2008 was essentially the only time that the show could have ever thrived. Damien Fahey made an astute point to E! News. He said, TRL's secret sauce was connection with artists, I think. Nowadays, there's Instagram. You can watch Cardi B do a live Insta story. You can watch any of your favorite artists capture mundane portions of their life on their phone. You can watch it all at any given moment, 24 hours a day. Watch any music videos on YouTube. Back in the day, we didn't have that. TRL was getting as close as possible to your favorite stars. And that was it. And speaking to NPR immediately prior to the show's finale in 2008, journalist Lizzie Goodman, who wrote the wonderful oral history of the New York rock scene, Meet Me in the Bathroom, echoed what I said earlier, or I guess I echoed her. I don't know, I'm tired. It's midnight my time. The famous first video that aired on MTV is Video Killed the Radio Star. This is like Internet killed the video star. What's really changing is for artists who have relied on big, brash, spectacle music videos to not just define their career, but to move it along, to allow it to evolve. They're in trouble. Madonna could not become Madonna from this platform today. But the good news is that all these other young, struggling acts who would have been considered very fringe before and who would have never been able to afford to make a real music video are now, thanks to technology and thanks to changing interests in listening and viewing, able to be contenders in that realm. And I'd like to give the final word to TRL co-creator Bob Cusbit, who I think I've pronounced his name differently every single time I've said it on this episode. He said, when we look back at it, there will never be as pure and as fun and as happy a ride or a time as when TRL was at its zenith. It was just the greatest ride you could ever have in pop television. What do you think?
I don't have anything bad to that. It's a high watermark for two mediums.
Yeah, wow,
recorded music and television. Grim. Thanks for listening. Stream BTS. Stream ICP.
Stream World's Greatest Detective.
ICP was robbed. ICP was robbed. Justice for the insane clown possibly. Booey. That's all I have to say about that.
Tell them who you are.
I'm Alex Heigl. This has been Too Much Information.
And I'm Jordan Runtagh. We'll catch you next time. Too Much Information was a production of iHeart Radio.
The show's executive producers are Noel Brown and Jordan Runtagh.
The show's supervising producer is Michael Alder June.
The show was researched, written, and hosted by Jordan Runtagh and Alex Heigl,
with original music by Seth Applebaum and the Ghost Funk Orchestra. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. For more podcasts on iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.